despite how challenging it was for me to experience being a child who was born from a parent who was addicted to crack cocaine, my grandmother demonstrated to me how we were to treat my mother. And so there were times when early in the morning, my mother would come around asking for money. It was usually before I was going to school, so between 5:30 and 7 a.m. This was happening every morning or a few times a week. And I can only imagine the anxiety that it caused my grandmother to know that my mother would be coming. And she was very disruptive. It was usually really loud. You know, she would be banging on the door, screaming outside. And so I'm sure the neighbors always heard. And those were the moments when my grandmother's voice would change, the intonation of her voice. It was like filled with pain and heartbreak and sorrow, but also this, don't bring no bullshit in this house. I'm trying to get your daughter out to school, that kind of thing. Trying to get your daughter and your son out to school. And I can always remember being upstairs in the room, getting dressed, just listening and feeling afraid, because I knew that I was probably going to run into my mom. I felt like my mother would wait for me sometimes because she knew that grandma would give me lunch money. My grandmother would give my brother and I lunch money. But I always just felt so sad because my grandmother was upset, and so I talk about this jovial woman who was so charismatic and caring and would literally give you the clothes off her back. And so my mother, I would perceive my mother through the lens of my family. And so, when it wasn't difficult, when my mother did come around and, she wasn't combative or she wasn't begging and she wasn't in an erratic state, we did bring her into the home. We did feed her. We bathed her. We made her feel safe. So I remember these baths. I called them sacred baths, and I wrote a poem about the baths. This is when we didn't know when's the last meal she had, or we could always tell by her behavior. She would be unable to talk about where she came from, and just very erratic. So my grandmother would run her a bubble bath with Epsom salt, and she would wash my mother in the tub, and she would keep the door open. My grandmother never really had to tell me what to do. I just knew to be close by. I knew to be close so that I could help her, because I knew she would need my help. And I also wanted to see, it was just this very, as a kid, it was just unique. And I knew that I couldn't talk about it with my friends because I assumed, and I just had a knowing that they wouldn't understand. My grandmother would wash my mother's body, and she would be bending down in the tub and examining my mother's body. My mother had contracted HIV, and my grandmother would be very careful about how she touched my mother's body. But she was examining her daughter, her baby, to make sure that she wasn't harmed. And when it was too difficult for her to stoop down, I would help. I jumped right in and I would help. When I was recording myself talking about the baths that we would give my mother, I remember just crying, because those were the kinds of emotions that I couldn't allow myself to release in the moment. I did not cry a lot when I was experiencing my mother, whether we were in the community or whether it was in this house. I was not crying. Those emotions were, they were reserved, and I just knew that I had to file them away. I knew that because my mother's condition and her mental state caused her to actually cry a lot. My mother heard voices. She was diagnosed with several chronic disorders, schizophrenia, there's a rap sheet. I can't even like grasp all the different ones. Dementia, schizophrenia, Tourette's, a lot of different cognitive challenges. And so she would cry a lot, and she would laugh while crying. And so I knew that if I cried in front of my mother, that it would set something off, and I didn't want to, even though it was painful, I couldn't cry in front of her. I had to like hold it in. The earliest memories that I have of my mother, we were living in Mount Airy, Westlake Lane. Was it Westlake Lane or Mount Airy? Okay, we were living in Mount Airy in an apartment. And my brother, Brian, has many more memories of what it was like living with my mother. He remembers, so a lot of what I know is because of the stories he shared with me. I do remember being in an apartment and being a baby or a toddler, and I was trying to get my balance, and there was an ironing board, and there was an iron, and the iron was plugged in to the ironing board. My mother was not home, and so I believe it was myself and my brother in the apartment, and I was trying to get my balance, and I was standing up and holding onto this ironing board, and the iron fell on me. And till this day, I have a burn mark on my leg, on my left leg. It's almost shaped like an oval, like a thumbprint. And I was burned that day by the iron. I remember it being very painful. And I remember that my mother was not there. And my brother remembers being in that house with, like a mattress on the floor. He remembers there being mice, roaches, and very limited food in the cabinets, little to no food in the refrigerator. And he remembers my mother, having friends coming in and out of the space. But it was not an ideal living arrangement, not the ideal circumstances, because my mother was addicted. She was an addict. And I remember bits and pieces of being in that apartment. So it's very scattered prior to me living here. I do remember all of a sudden just being here. And that's an interesting feeling, because growing up in this house, like it was always like our house, like a family house, but there was always a part of me that felt like, are we ever going to go home? As I was a little girl, I remember not understanding my mother's sickness. People would say she's just sick. And I wrote about this in the book, but when you're a kid and you think about being sick, you think of a cold. You think of, oh, maybe I don't have to go to school because I have a cold. And I just thought my mother had the longest cold ever, because she was always sick, and her sickness didn't look like the sickness of other people who I knew to be sick. And so I knew that my mother's sickness was different. And, there were lots of adjustments being made around us. And I just felt like I was misplaced. Like I felt dislocated. I felt like, when is my mom not going to be sick? And when are we going to go? When are we going to be our own family? And that never happened. So, as a child, I just learned that this is home. This is it. I'm where I'm supposed to be. My grandmother is like my mom, grandmom. She's like my grandma mom. She became the mother. My aunts became more than aunts. And that's just what it was. That's what it was. There was not a lot of talking. People were not over explaining anything to me. They were operating in real time. And I just rolled with it. So when I was writing the book, there were a lot of tears. There were a lot of like these buried emotions that came to the surface. And this is good. This is healthy. And this is part of the process for me as I think about my healing journey and what it's been for me over the course of the last, I would say 4 years now. So I spent many years in therapy talking through some of the challenges that I had with my mother. And it prepared me to finally write the book. It prepared me to finally be able to have the language to tell the story. It's not easy, and it's not supposed to be easy. And so for me, it's really important for people like me to understand that if there are barriers to us healing our trauma and barriers to us forgiving our parents and barriers to us really understanding addiction, then we have to take action. And for me, I just lacked the understanding. I didn't know how to understand my mother's behavior. I resented my mother. And I never told anyone. It was like my secret. Even though I understood that she was sick, I understood that her addiction was a disease. However, I still felt that she neglected me. I still felt that she abandoned us. And I still felt like she was choosing lucidly to, do things like steal from us and embarrass us. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. And, as I got older, when I did know better, I still didn't know how to talk about and reconcile all these emotions. I had a lot of reservations with going to therapy in the first place. And the things that I wanted to say about how I felt about my mother, I felt like I couldn't share those things with my family. I felt like, I just felt like we all go through stuff. Like they went through more than I went through. So how dare, what do I look like complaining to my family about the ills and, my trauma when I had very limited understanding of what they experienced. So there was just a lot of different mixed emotions. I don't blame anyone in my family for anything. I can't blame anyone for anything. I believe that everyone does what they're able to do with what they have. I truly believe that. I was raised by women who were, Kathleen's granddaughter, Trisha's niece, Marilyn's niece, Tremaine's daughter, Zania's cousin. All these different layers of the women that I was surrounded around. Closed mouths don't get fed. And I learned early on to always be very, very cautious, to always protect family, to always, be mindful of who you trust and those kinds of things. So when I was able to really heal and to center my mother in a way that really focused on what happened to her and how it happened, oh man, it lit a fire in me, because the knowledge gaps for me were knowledge gaps about my mother's cognition, medically, scientifically, and it was also the knowledge about the medical inaccuracies that fueled the myths that, really constructed these perceptions that we have of Black women. One of the most understudied topics in modern American history is the impact of the crack era on the Black family structure and how Black women were impacted, and so being able to tell this story for my mother and for myself and for children like me and for women like my mother is an honor. Is an honor. It is long overdue. We need to be able to heal. We don't need to go out and do a lot of research to tell our stories. We lived it. We know it. We were there. We saw it. And so I'm just really, really hoping that people will free themselves. I spent almost 40 years of my life holding on to things that didn't belong to me. I don't want anyone else to carry this. I want every one of us to lay it down, to give voice to it and to say the thing that we have been terrified of saying. We can't allow feelings of shame, unworthiness, guilt. We can't let these low vibrational emotions prevent us from healing ourselves. And so this is the work that I believe is most important at this time, so that we can reclaim our own stories, not just for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren, so we can rewrite the history and reclaim the narrative and reclaim our truths.